All right. Hey, there was a couple that had a very big fight. In fact, the fight was so large that neither one of them decided they were going to talk to each other for a period of time. And because they were so mad and they wouldn't talk to each other, neither one of them wanted to give in first. Okay, so they're going about their house, sound familiar? And they were not talking to one another, but the man, he had a business flight that he had to be a part of or get very early in the morning. And so he left his wife a note because the alarm clock was on her side, and it said, "Wake me up at 5 a.m. so I'll make my flight," right? So he goes to sleep that night. He wakes up, and he wakes up on his own. It's 7 a.m., and he's upset. "I've missed my flight." He wakes the wife. He says, "It's 7 a.m. I just missed my flight. Didn't you see my note?" And she points to his nightstand, and there's a note neatly folded there. He grabs it and opens it up, and it says, "It's 5 a.m., time to wake up." As onlookers, we might say that's kind of silly, right? But the truth is, it probably sounded very familiar because we've all done things like that. I have so many embarrassing stories of arguments that I've had with my wife over the silliest things and the silly things that we've done to each other when there was an argument. I bet all of you have stories too, right? I'm like, I don't even want to share some of those with you. The truth is that in life, fighting and conflict is unavoidable. And if you think about this, even since you were kids, you were in arguments, right? This has been happening all of our lives. The Bible actually says this, "Yet man is born to trouble as surely as sparks fly upward." What does that mean? Well, the sparks in a flyer, which way do they go? They start drifting upward. We see them in the smoke, right? Those little embers going up. And he says, as surely as that happens, because it always happens, so is man born to trouble. They're born for conflict. It's going to happen in your life. It's just the nature of who we are. And so it's inevitable that all couples will fight. Let's just all agree to that right now, that it's going to happen. In fact, there were some surveys done, and I'm going to just kind of rattle these off a little bit, but the average couple, okay, they disagree 7 times per day on average. That doesn't mean you're getting in a fight. It just means that you disagree. What are we going to eat? Okay, that's a big one, right? Where are we going to go? What are we going to do? Maybe a difference of opinion on something we saw, heard, or done, right? And this is another statistic. 30% of couples, 30% are going to argue on a weekly basis. So if you've gotten a fight this week, you're just on par with everybody else. Another 28% said that they will argue once a month. So if you got people arguing, that means about 60% of the people here, right? More than one out of 2 are your relationship, you are going to fight at least once a month. That's the average. Now, another 32% say that they fight multiple times, at least once or multiple times in a year. That's over 90%. All couples will end up fighting. And some of you, maybe on the way here, got in an altercation driving to church. Has that ever happened to you? You know, maybe the kids are in the car, you get really frustrated, but as soon as you pull into that parking lot, you might have been screaming at someone, but you're like, "Hi, how are you? Yes, it's wonderful today." We changed everything just so that we don't appear that way. We put on that smile. And the question is, when you fight, do you fight right? That's the question. Because 30%, one more statistic, 30% of people say their style of arguing is very or somewhat unhealthy. Now, I'll be very honest with you, that was me. And still there's a degree of unhealthiness when I argue or in conflict. You see, I came from a family that yelled first and asked questions later, right? This is the way it was. We didn't actually have conversation. We didn't try to figure out what was going on inside, what your feelings were. Those didn't matter. We just yelled at each other. That's the way it was. And so when I walked into my relationship with my wife, that's how I was with her. In fact, if you asked my wife, and she was to be honest with you, she would say, we really rarely argued while we were dating. And then when we got married, I didn't even know who this guy was. He was just like, all of a sudden he's screaming and yelling, right? And so all of us, or at least 30% of the people are saying we don't even know how to do it correctly. We're confused when it comes to that area of our life. But the truth is, fights are going to happen in your marriage. And I guess the question is, when they happen, what will you do? So we're in this series called Love Story, and we're looking at an Old Testament book called the Song of Songs or the Song of Solomon. It's been phrased 2 different ways. And the reason it's called Song of Solomon because it was written by King Solomon, who is the son of King David. And he's writing this kind of poetic, like prose, if you will, or literature, and it's about the romance between a man and a woman. And as we've been going through this, especially last week, if you were here with us, no, 2 weeks ago, if you missed that one, I want to encourage you to go listen to the messages because they don't hold back. I mean, they talk about everything. And we've been following this story since this couple first met. First, there was the attraction, how they kind of saw each other and were attracted to each other. Then there was the dating period and the courting period. Then there's the wedding. Then there's the honeymoon. And then the wedding night, right? And if you've missed, like I said, one of the messages, you can see it on our website or you can go to YouTube and catch it there. But the narrative has now shifted from courtship to marriage, and there are 3 stages of marriage, okay? The first stage is the honeymoon phase. Honeymoon actually means sweet month. Honeymoon, a full moon, right? You go through one cycle of a moon. And he says in 1 month, that first honeymoon is awesome. It's so sweet. And then there's a second phase, and that is called the disillusionment phase. And that's when we realize what marriage is really about. Like, what did I get myself into? And then there's what's called the commitment phase, and that's where we resolve to love our spouse, warts and all. Like, okay, I've kind of figured this out. It's not going to be perfect, but I'm still going to stay committed to my spouse. And today, in our story, in our narrative, as we're going through the book, the honeymoon is over. And the couple gets into their first fight. So let's see what happens. And the Shulamite, as a reminder, she is the woman or the bride. She says, I sleep, but my heart is awake. She's asleep, right? She's trying to go to bed, but there's a restlessness going on inside of her. Why? It's the voice of my beloved. He knocks, saying, open for me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one, for my head is covered with dew, and my locks with the drops of the night. He's coming to the door, but when? He's been out so late, he's got dew on his hair. He's like, you know when the dew shows up? I go out there at night. It's not there yet, right? Until the wee hours when it starts to cool again. And that's where he shows up finally. She's been trying to go to sleep, but he shows up. He says, how can I put it on again? I have washed my feet. Okay, so she says, he responds, my locks with the drops of the night, that she's quoting what he's saying to her. And now she says, I have taken off my robe. I've already taken off my robe, she says. How can I put it on again? Like, I'm already comfortable. You haven't even shown up. So I have washed my feet. How can I defile them? You see what's going on here? She's restless. She's in bed. He shows up late, knocking on the door. Can I come in? She's like, look I've already put on my robe. You think I'm going to get up for you? Where were you when I was ready to come get you, right? Basically, he came home late from work. And he's from work or he's been out with the boys, whatever it is, and she's waited and waited. There was no text. There was no phone call. There was no messenger to tell me you were going to be late. And now you show up and you expect me to just come to the door and get you? She's like, no way. And so he knocks on the door, but he doesn't let her, or she does. He knocks on the door, but she doesn't let him in. So the first thing that you might want to note, and if you pull out your program and pull out the notes, this will really help with the message to stick a little bit today. And especially if you're married, I think these are going to be important points. But don't learn how to not fight. Don't learn how to not fight. Learn how to fight right. Okay? Do you understand that? Don't learn how to not fight, but learn how to fight right. When we returned from our honeymoon, Carol and I, we got married in Mexico. We come back, and when she came back, we did not live together. We did not sleep together. So she came right into the house, and it was my house that she moved into. And she was working in Miami at that time. We were both working. I was working from home. And so she would commute and come back. That first day she came home, I was in the back room on my computer. I hear the door open. I hear her with a very joyful voice, honey, I'm home. And I'm like, all right, hi, honey, I'll be right out. Now, I'm finishing up whatever it was on my computer. And you know how it is when you're working? You don't really kind of lose track of time. I honestly don't remember if it was 30 seconds, a minute, or 5 minutes, or 10 minutes. I don't know. I just was finishing up what I was doing. I walk out into the living room area, and there's my wife standing by the door, still standing there with her head down, her purse in her hand, her briefcase, and her lunch pail in her hand like this. And I walk up to her to give her a kiss, and I'm like, hey, honey, what's going on? What's wrong? Is everything okay? And she says to me, you didn't meet me at the door. And I'm like, what? So I get inside, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, they meet you at the door? And I'm like, okay, but I love you. You were just so happy. I couldn't say anything to make her happy in that moment. That set the tone for the rest of the evening. That was it. It was like she was not happy and she was not going to change. And the thing is, I didn't realize that that's something that she wanted or expected. After that, man, I would go to meet her at the door. And my wife, by the way, is great at this. You see her, right? She notices you. She greets you right away. And it's so important to her, but I didn't realize at the time. You see, we think that a marriage should have no conflict. We think that it's automatically going to mesh, but the truth is we don't really know each other that well, right? You may know each other a lot, but there are some things you're going to discover about your spouse that you are like, hey, man, I didn't realize that that's what you want. Or there are things that they do that you're like, oh, man, I didn't really think that you were like that, and man, I got to get used to this, right? We think that if there is conflict in a marriage, think about this, that there's something wrong with the marriage. Because most of us, when we're thinking about getting married, is that we thought that marriage was going to solve all the issues that we had in our lives, right? Do you remember back to when you were single? And you were just like, man, who's that person? We're constantly looking. We're constantly trying to find that person we're going to marry. And we think when we get married, that's going to change our lives. But here's the thing. It is difficult. That if it's difficult, then something is wrong. But that's not true. Like I said, we were created for conflict, you and I. That's what we just read from the Bible. And on top of that, men and women are different. Anybody know that? Men and women are a little different. And we have different preferences. We have different personalities. On top of that, there are sin, and there's our selfishness, and there's our pride, and our brokenness, and our impatience. And all these things come together when two people are living under one roof, and it's going to spell conflict at different times in our lives. And when conflict arises, both parties think the problem is the other person, right? We're like, oh, it can't be me. It's got to be them. When you're married, there are a few things that you discovered. I think there's 3 things that we discover. The first is you begin to realize how selfish your spouse really is. I can't believe how selfish she is. You know, what's up? The second thing is that your spouse begins to realize how selfish you are. And they'll point it out to you. I can't believe that you just said, I can't believe that. Why weren't you? Right? You start to realize this. But the third thing that you realize is that you both decide that it's the other person's selfishness that's the biggest problem. All right, maybe I'm selfish, but yours is the real issue, right? And so we try to change their selfishness instead of ourselves. James says this, the Apostle James, he's writing, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? It's like the fights that you guys have, it's coming from inside each of you. That's what's happening. And you're not excluded. Like if I'm reading, okay, that's me too. And we need to realize that our selfishness is the biggest problem in the marriage. That's one of the things that each and every one of us has to decide. It's not just them, it's me. And if it's my selfishness that's the biggest problem, then I need to address it. You see, conflict is meant to change your marriage and to change each and every one of us as individuals. None of us signed up for that, is the truth of the matter. When I got married, I wasn't like, okay, I really need a big dose of change in my life. I was like, that's not what I was thinking. But the funny thing is, that's the way God designed marriage, to change us and to transform us and that marriage. Most of us go into a marriage thinking that the other person needs change. But God, in his infinite wisdom, is using marriage to change each and every one of us. And if you want to add change, some more change, just have a couple kids. Then it'll change it even more. Listen, if we miss the fact that it's God's idea to use marriage to transform us and to change us, then we're going to miss out on the transformative work that God wants to do in each of our lives. It's the truth. God's not up there necessarily like, yeah, they're fighting him. God's up there going, listen, this is an opportunity for you to change. And if you'll receive it, and if you'll take it, God's going to make you more and more like his son. The Bible says this, where there are no oxen, or where no oxen are, the trough is clean. But much increase comes by the strength of an ox. There's verses saying to us that if you have a oxen, you're not going to have a clean stable, right? But if you're not going to have any oxen, if you want a clean stable, you can't have any oxen, or you're going to be cleaning up all the time, is what he's trying to say. If you want to avoid problems in your marriage, then it won't be very productive. If you're going to try to avoid all those things, you're not going to have any produce. But he's saying much increase comes by the strength of an ox. If you want a healthy relationship, if you want increase in your life, if you want a big harvest from your marriage, then he says you've got to engage in the messiness. You got to clean up some of the poop, right? And that just comes with the territory. And so if you are learning how not to fight, because we're trying to avoid it, you're learning how to suppress things in your life. Like number one, your feelings. You know, sometimes it's easier not to tell somebody how you're feeling than it is to deal with the issue that's going on, right? It's like, I'm just going to avoid talking about it, but what happens? We go through life not enjoying that relationship, walking on eggshells. And God is saying, no. There's a reason why it's coming up so that you can bring those things to the surface, or avoiding areas in your life that need improvement, right? Conflict in our marriages was meant for God to use to change us and to better us. And so I want you to know this, that healthy relationships have good fights. And you can write that down. Healthy relationships have good fights. Not bad fights, but good ones. So back to our couple. She's so upset that she's not willing to come to the door right now. I'm just mad at him. He should have been here when I was ready for him. He's not, so I'm not coming to the door. But she gets restless. And so she finally gets up to go to the door. Let's pick it up again. It says, my beloved put his hand by the latch of the door, and my heart yearned for him. So she's like, okay, it's overcoming me. I'm going to go and get him. I arose to open for my beloved, and my hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh on the handles of the lock. I opened for my beloved, but my beloved had turned away and was gone. So by the time she comes to the door, he's gone. My heart leaped up when he spoke, and I sought him, but I could not find him. I called him, but he gave me no answer. So she's like restless. She's thinking about it. She's tossing and turning. All right, I might as well go to the door, and I'll open it up and let him in, right? We've all been there. Okay, I'll do this. And when she opens it up, he's gone. He's like, I'm not sticking around for this. You didn't want to come get the door? Fine, I'm out of here. And he leaves. And so this is something else that you might want to know. Don't react in the same manner as your spouse. If you want to have good fights, don't react in the same manner as your spouse. You see, when we're in conflict, what we often do is tend to rise to the same level of emotion that other person is now coming at you with. You know what I'm saying? They get angry, you get angry. They get sad, you get sad. And we see this the most when we're driving in traffic, don't we? And you're like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I was driving in Miami this one time, and I get off the Palmetto Expressway, very busy expressway, and I get off. I'm on the on-ramp, and there's 2 lanes to turn left. I'm in, for you guys, I'm in the left lane, I'm in, and there's another car in my right going to take a left also. Now, as we turned on, it was actually 57th Street. As we turn on to 57th Street, there is a 5 lanes. Okay, 5 lanes available. So you have that little dotted line that shows you where to go. So I need to go straight to go south, right? But instead, if I get in those other lanes, I have to get back on the Palmetto. Well, the guy on my right is cutting really close. In fact, he's over the line. He's on my side. He's cutting me off. He's going to push me off onto the on-ramp, and I need to go straight. It happened to be that both of our windows were open. And I wasn't, honestly, to God, I was not upset or anything, but I'm just like, hey, watch your line. And he yells back at me, idiota, in a Spanish accent. I don't know Spanish, but I had a pretty good idea what he was calling me. And I'm like, what? And I started to get upset because he was upset, right? If you ever, right? When someone gets upset, you match them. She's upset with him. So he's like, all right, I'm just going to get upset with you. The same thing happens with our spouses, right? And the same thing happens when my wife uses certain tones with me. The tone that she uses means everything. Think about it. There is a difference between, hey, what have you been up to all day? And what have you been up to all day? Right? Totally different just by the tone in which we use. And if someone says to me, what have you been up to all day? I immediately go on the defense. Right? I'm like, I don't know. What was I supposed to be doing? I'm thinking in my head. What didn't I do? And I start to get defensive. And how we talk to our spouse means so much. And we must learn to not immediately react, but instead to respond. Because when I react, the first thing I do is I react, it's usually an emotional outcome, right? That's the first thing that's going to happen. I'm going to respond emotionally, then stopping to think through how I should respond. Because what happens is it comes from a place in our hearts of defense or of anger sometimes. And so in turn, my spouse, what I'm going to do is if I react that way, is I'm going to hurt her back. In fact, the Bible says this, the words of the reckless, so if you just respond emotionally, he says, the words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. So if you're going to respond as quickly as you can from the emotions in your heart, you're probably going to say something that you regret. But instead, he says, hold on a minute. Don't be reckless. Wait a moment. Instead of just reacting, why don't you take a moment to respond? The truth is, and if we all thought back at this in our life and in the situations that we've been into, maybe there's just general conflict that you're thinking of in your life, or maybe there's specific ones. But if we could avoid so much pain if we could just learn to pause and think before we reacted. And this is something I had to learn when I first got married, because I told you my past, right? Shout first, ask questions later. And that's the way I began to respond until I finally stopped and said, okay, maybe I should just stop and ask her and talk to her a little bit more. Know this. This is what's going to happen. And every time I do premarital counseling, I say the same thing to every person. I say, know this, that you're going to love your spouse, but sometimes you're not going to like them. This is the truth, right? You can love your spouse, but there are going to be moments when you're not going to like them. Why? Because in a conflict, it's always one person hurting another. Think about this statement. Where were you? You didn't show up on time. You could say that so nicely to your spouse. Hey, where were you? You didn't show up on time. And it's going to hurt you. Why? Because I failed. I failed to show up on time. I did something wrong. And immediately you're going to be upset with the person who points out something wrong in you. When you said this, they might say, it made me feel like I don't matter. Okay, that hurts because I didn't make you feel like you matter. When you did that, it made me feel unloved. Now, those are great ways to actually enter a conversation. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do those things. What I am saying is, though, we have to be careful if we're on the receiving end, because it's immediately going to hurt us. Because in some way, shape, or form, I let them down, I failed them, and they're pointing out that flaw in that moment. And when that happens, you're not going to like it. And that's why it's important to take your time and not just react. I have to think about what my wife just said, right? She's not trying to hurt me. In fact, my wife had to stop me at one point in our marriage and just said, John, listen, I want you to know something. And she would say this before she would give me whatever it was she was going to say. I'm not your enemy. I love you, and I want something good out of this. And that would stop me and prepare me to start thinking about what she was about to say instead of just react and think, okay, the ultimate thing is that she wants what's best for us. You see, when you just react, right, or when you don't just react and you don't add fuel to the fire, you leave God to do the work that only He can do. Check out what happens next. So the Shulamite, the woman, the bride, she goes out. Remember, she goes out to look for him. So the watchmen who went out about the city found me, and they struck me. They wounded me. The keepers of the walls took my veil away from me. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, that you tell him I am lovesick. So this is a very poetic language here, right? So it's like prose, and it's also, she's kind of like a dream sequence. She's kind of explaining, or Solomon's writing this in the sense of like a story that's somewhat fictional in a sense. And so watchmen don't really hit her, but she's out looking for her and for him, and she reaps the consequences of having come after him so late. Do you see what's happening here? She waited, and now there are consequences. And so the next thing to understand is this: focus on changing you and let God change them. Focus on changing you and let God change your spouse. See, the watchman represents God's authority in that city, right? And it's not our job to change our spouse. It's the Holy Spirit's job to change your spouse. I don't know if you knew that or not, but just know that right now, okay? Because all of us want to change our spouse. There's some things I would like to change about my wife. She's amazing, right? But there are some things I'm like, I just kind of wish you would change. And so I pray even harder about those things. My job is to love my wife like Christ loved the church and let him do the rest in her life. You see, your goal may be to change them. Think about this. Your goal may be able to change that person in your life. But think about this. Even if you change them and you win, it doesn't mean that you always win. Let me explain it this way. Has anyone ever here, when you were younger, any time in your life, ever yelled shotgun when you were trying to get into a car? Right? Right? Shotgun! Shotgun! You know, when I was a kid, did it all the time. I had 2 brothers that I lived with. But my kids, they do this constantly now. Shotgun! Shotgun! And then the argument is over who yelled shotgun first, right? They're like, I want the front seat. No, but I yelled shotgun. No, I said it when I was in the house. I said it 2 days ago. I said it this, it's like, wait a minute. And they're arguing and arguing and arguing. You know, when they're arguing so much over who called shotgun, it doesn't matter who actually gets shotgun. Nobody's happy. Like, they're not even happy anymore. They're upset because they yelled. The kids are upset in the back. I should have been in shotgun, right? And that's what happens. You may have won, but it still causes strife in your relationship. And that's what happens sometimes when we try to force somebody into something. A couple at the church before I was here in Miami took me to dinner because they wanted some advice. They were newly married, and they had some struggles that they were going through. And they were like, Pastor John, can you talk to us about a few things? And so we talked through a bunch of stuff, and I tried to give them the best advice and some biblical things that I could tell them. But at one point, the wife says to me, he keeps bringing up these scripture verses and telling me this is the way I should behave. Excuse me. I still find it funny. Because they were trying to change each other. And his way of doing it was like, here's what the Bible tells me. Now you should do this, like to her. And I said, listen, you need to stop that right now. I never want to hear you do that again to your wife. She's going to resent you for it. Not only is she going to resent you for it, she's going to resent the Bible, she's going to resent God, and she's never going to want to crack the Bible again because you're doing this in her life. You're trying to use God and the Bible to manipulate the situation so you can have her behave the way you want her to behave. If you keep trying to chase someone's behavior, you actually might succeed. But you may win that battle, but you could possibly lose their heart. Does that make sense? Yeah, and so you want to be careful in how you do this. The Shulamite wrote this, the watchmen who found me, they struck me. They found her and they struck her. God has a way of changing other people, but you have to let God do the changing in his or her life. You've got to step aside and let him do it, because when you force the change, you might get change out of obedience or because they feel pressured to do it. But when God changes them, he actually changes their heart, and it's permanent. Because when we do it, they're only doing it because of us for a period of time. And that will change over time. But when God does it, he transforms the heart. Listen to what Peter, he gives instruction to the wives. But guys, we could put husbands or wives in this. In the same way, submit yourself to your own husbands or wives, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives. Do you get it? He's saying by your behavior is the way you're going to win your spouse. Not because you're demanding it, not because you're making them, not because you're like yelling out ultimatums. It's because you decide to change who you are, follow God, and watch how God does a work in their heart and transforms them. Notice it doesn't say by your clever arguing, your persistent badgering, right? It's your conduct that changes their heart. Let me say this. If you're faithful to do your part and work on you, trust that God will be faithful to do his part and work on your spouse in their lives. So let's see what happens next. So the daughters of Jerusalem, they're her friends, and they're going to say some things. He says, what is your beloved more than another beloved? Or, oh, fairest among women? So what's the big deal? Now there's different takes on this. Some of them are thinking that they're trying to prompt her to think about the things that are good about her husband. I kind of take it like this. They're like, so what's so great about him? They're like, she comes to them and they're like, yeah, well, what's so great about him? What's your beloved more than another beloved that you so charge us? Like, there's more fish in the sea. They're giving him a bad advice, basically. The Shulamite then responds, my beloved is white and ruddy, chief among 10,000. His head is like the finest gold. His locks are wavy and black as a raven. His eyes are like doves by the rivers of waters, washed with milk and fitly set. His cheeks are like beds of spices, banks of scented herbs. His lips are lilies dripping liquid myrrh. His hands are rods of gold set in beryl. His body is carved ivory inlaid with sapphires. This is what I try to tell my wife all the time. I'm going to put that scripture verse in her mirror, on her mirror. His legs are pillars of marble set on bases of fine gold. His countenance is like Lebanon, excellent as the cedars. His mouth is most sweet. Yes, he is altogether lovely. He is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. So the next thing that we should know is this: don't take your relationship anywhere else. Don't take your relationship anywhere else. And this means two things. So if you can write this down, the first is keep your private things private. Keep your private things private. You don't want to take this relationship anywhere else. Keep your private things private. How do you talk about your husband and wife when they're not around? Among your friends, maybe your family members, right? Or at work. The way we talk about them is so important. In fact, Paul's writing to the Ephesians. He says this: let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. So it's so important what we say about other people in their presence, outside of their presence. He says, keep those private things private. Not everyone is going to give you wise advice, and probably every one of us at one point or another has experienced someone giving us the wrong advice, right? These girlfriends, they don't really have good advice. What's so great about your guy? Tell us what's so great about the beloved. And aren't there other beloveds out there that you could kind of go out with instead of this guy? You know, I don't think they're giving her the best advice. She's like, can you find him and tell me where he is? And they're like, yeah, just maybe you should just find a different guy, right? Everyone here probably should, as a person, it means you never, let me say this. Just because you're going to keep the private thing private and there's certain things you're not going to share with anyone, you should only share with your spouse, but you may need somebody that you can confide in to help you when you are in strife. But you should find a person that loves both you and your spouse. Not one that just loves you, okay? We all have those. But we need one that cares about both of you and cares about the other person, because they're not going to tell you the things that you want to hear. They're going to tell you the things that you need to hear in your relationship. Because the truth is, God works through other people to speak into our lives like, yeah, you know that thing? You need to change that a little bit too. And they're going to point to that in our lives. So have that person who you can speak to. But your mom may not be the best person, by the way. Okay, just saying. She's more than willing to hear everything you have to say. But sometimes you can end up painting a picture of your spouse for her, but she doesn't see the reality because you're only hearing the negative, right? And then what happens is down the road that resurfaces at an inappropriate time, and it doesn't go well in that relationship. So just be careful when it comes to that. But keep your private things private. But the second thing is, don't leave. Write this down. I didn't put it in your outline, but just write it down. Don't leave. Don't leave. Don't leave. In one of our first fights in marriage, I was so frustrated with my wife. Again, just pictured John out of control, yelling, screaming. Things weren't going well. I got so frustrated with her. I walked out that door, front door, slammed the door behind me, got in my car, and went for a drive. That's it, you know? And as I'm driving around Miramar, Florida, and then all of a sudden, you know, God's like, John. And he's like, John, you need to go back and be present. And I turned my car around, and I drove, and I parked, and I went back inside. You know, sometimes we all need a break from our thoughts, right? But here's what you need to do, is don't leave. We're almost there. Are you guys coming up? We're a little ahead. It's okay. See, let you relax. Oh, we're getting there, okay? Don't leave, okay? Listen, leaving communicates that your love is only conditional. It's only conditional if we're getting along. It's only conditional if I'm not upset in this moment, right? That's not the love that you want to communicate to your spouse. Don't leave. You're communicating that your relationship is so fragile that if you get in an argument with someone else, it's just out the door. I've had family members that we would get in arguments and they would say, that's it, I'm not going to talk, I'm not coming over ever again. One person in particular, I had to say, listen, can you please not do that anymore when we're in an argument? I'm still going to love you. I still love you. And just because we're upset right now with each other doesn't mean I don't want to see you anymore. Sometimes we have conflict and we have to deal with it. But if you just keep doing this every single time, I'm always wondering if I'm going to get you too upset that you're just going to go. And that really struck a chord with that person at the time. But listen, here's another thing. Sleep in the same bed. Please sleep in the same bed. I watch TV and there's like, I'm sleeping on the couch. I'm in the doghouse. I hate seeing that because that's one of the worst things you can do for your marriage. Listen, you may not be happy with them. I already told you, you're going to love them, but sometimes you're not going to be happy, okay? You're not going to like them. Just remember that. And there are moments where I've had to go to bed, and I don't want to be in that bed, but I'll say to my wife, I'll just say this, I love you, but I'm angry right now. Because I want her to know I love you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not necessarily happy right now, but I want you to be assured that my love is still here for you. Listen, sometimes people go, should we get separated? They come to me, should we get separated? We're struggling in our marriage. And I say, no. That's the worst thing you can do in your marriage. There's only one reason or a couple reasons why you would ever get separated if your marriage is struggling. And the reasons are if there's abuse in your house and you're not safe. And the other thing is if the other person is so involved in addictive behavior and not changing that they need a wake-up call, you may have to get a separation. Aside from that, the chances of you working it out don't go up because you've separated and now you're living in two places. They only go up if you realize I'm stuck in this house with this person, I better figure it out, right? That's how it gets changed. So don't leave. Don't ever leave. You love that person, you stay. You sleep in the same bed, and you work it out. Here's one more thing, last thing, because the band wants to come up. The daughters of Jerusalem. So they say, where has your beloved gone, O fairest among women? Where has your beloved turned aside that we may seek him with you? So they kind of have a change of heart after she says, no, I love him. My beloved has gone to his garden, to the bed of spices, to feed the flock in the gardens and to gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He feeds his flock among the lilies. So she's like, hey, he's coming back. And then he finally speaks. Oh, my love, you are as beautiful as Tirzah, lovely as Jerusalem, awesome as any army with banners. I don't know why you would, compare her to an army, but apparently that's a pretty awesome thing. Turn your eyes away from me, for they have overcome me. Your hair is like a flock of goats going down from Gilead. If you were with us from the beginning, does that sound familiar? Your teeth are like a flock of sheep which have come up from the washing. Everyone bears twins, and none is barren among them. Like a piece of pomegranate are your temples behind your veil. This is the exact same language that he had used before. The Shulamite goes looking for her husband. She finds him. And it's evident that there is this repentance that has taken place in this relationship, at least on her part. And so he responds. And he repeats these words again. And though they're in conflict, he's saying to her, my love for you has not changed. I think of you the same way I thought of you before. And I'm just as devoted as the day we got married. And that's so important to communicate to your spouse. And so the final thing is this, though. Be quick to forgive. Be quick to forgive. Listen, this is something that you need to make a practice in your life, especially in your marriage, but everywhere. Make a practice of being quick to forgive someone when something goes wrong, when you've been offended. The truth is, half the time I've been offended, it's my fault. Something's wrong with me. Something's going on. So I'm just wasting time. But when someone else does it, we need to be quick to forgive. There's some strange thing inside of us that we think holding on to something is good in some way. Like maybe I'll use it for later. But when has that ever helped? Think about that for a moment. When has ever you holding on to something, a grudge, anger, frustration about somebody else ever helped that relationship? I've never seen it happen. And so holding on to things only creates more separation between you and your spouse. Early in our marriage, there was a practice that I did every day with my wife. And I wish it was my idea as a pastor. It should have been, but it wasn't. She said, John, I want to pray every morning before we go to work. And so every morning we woke up, I hold hands with her before we left, and I prayed. Do you know how hard that is when you got in an argument with them the day before and it hasn't been resolved? I was like, oh gosh, this is difficult. But as the man, the one who was responsible to make sure that happened, I was going to grab her hand no matter what. I was committed to doing it. And there were some mornings like, God, how am I supposed to grab her hand? How am I supposed to pray in front of you, God? Right? It was a prompt. It was a catalyst for me to talk about it, to recompense this situation, to make amends or whatever it was that needed to happen, because I'm like, how, Lord, can I hold her hand, pray before you, and I haven't even addressed this issue in our lives? And even though it was her idea, it was one of the best things that ever happened in our relationship, because it forced me every single time to go back to her and try to reconcile what was going on and not let it linger. The Bible says this in 1 Corinthians, this is what love is. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. And it keeps no record of wrongs. If you want to keep no records of wrongs, then you got to be quick to forgive someone else for whatever happened. And we should be quick to forgive because you and I have been forgiven already. We've been forgiven of so much. In fact, Jesus, think about this. When Jesus came here, he didn't wait for us to be good to him. He took responsibility and he offered forgiveness even though it wasn't his fault. Jesus was not up on the cross because of him. He was up on the cross because of us. It wasn't his fault, but he said, you know what? I'm going to just do it. I'm going to pay the penalty. I'm going to make it happen for us. And instead of trying to be right, this is right, he decides I'm going to be on a rescue mission to try to get them back. And that's what we need to be. Instead of trying to prove we're right in our marriages, we need to be on a rescue mission to try to get them back. and to win their hearts again. You know, Romans tells us this, maybe you've heard it before. God demonstrates his own love toward us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. We were still sinning, we were still running away, and he says, no, I'm going to come and get you. And that's how we fight right. If you want to fight right in your marriage, because in marriage you're going to have conflict. It's going to happen. If you're going to avoid it, you're just avoiding the work that God wants to do in you and in that marriage. But if you're willing to fight right, God can use it and transform you and transform your marriage. God's going to use conflict to train you in your life. And he's going to use it to transform your heart. You know when your spouse loves you? You know when I know that my wife loves me? When we have conflict and she forgives me. It's like, man, she really does love me. When we are struggling and she stays and she doesn't leave. When she fights so that we can be one together. That's when I know my spouse loves me. And that's the way we need to be toward them. That's the way we need to be. Fight for this relationship. Fight for the oneness. I wanted to say this. If you're struggling with something in your marriage, now is a good time to bring it to God. Because we're going to end in communion. And communion is a picture of Christ's sacrifice for us. It's a picture of that forgiveness that he's offering each and every one of us freely. My body was broken for you. My blood was shed for you for the forgiveness and the remission of sins. And in the same way, we want to be Christ-like to our spouse. And so if there's something that you've been struggling with in your relationship, can you take a moment to at least pray about it? Say, God, what can you do with this? And you might be thinking, man, but this one is irreparable. Not with God. Not with God. God can do anything. And he can overcome anything in your life. You may not see it. You may not even believe it in this moment. But if you have the grain of a mustard seed to actually pray it, God, I have the faith of a mustard seed. Pray that you would do something and transform my marriage, then God can do it. But you've got to open up and you've got to be willing.